This is Play-by-Playcast,
Is that faster than a Greyhound?
the podcast about play-by-play guys, for play-by-play guys, by, I'm told, a play-by-play guy.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Now here's the host of Play-by-Playcast, Tom Bodette. Wait, the Motel 6 guy?
We'll leave the light on for you.
No, Joel Godet.
Joe Godet.
Joel
Joel?
with an L.
Okay, here's your host, Joel Godet.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
Back at it here on a Friday morning. This is Play-by-Playcast. I am Joel Godet, and thank you as always for clicking subscribe or download, rating, and reviewing the podcast about play-by-play broadcasters for play-by-play broadcasters, hosted by someone that purports to be a play-by-play broadcaster. Mick Gillispie is our guest today. He is the voice of the Tennessee Smokies, a AA affiliate of the Chicago Cubs, and really much, much more than that. He was most recently named the Ballpark Digest. I used to subscribe to Baseball Digest as a child. I don't know if it exists anymore. It was a cool little magazine, like 7.5 by something. It was a small little pamphlet. Anyway, the Ballpark Digest 2017 Minor League Co-Broadcaster of the Year, Mick Gillispie. Friend of the pod, Howard Kellman, was the other co-broadcaster of the year of the Indianapolis Indians. And we'll talk about both those guys being named the broadcaster of the year, kind of sharing that honor, what it all means to Mick right off the top here. And we'll get into Mick here in a second. I always feel like I need to have some sort of some sort of intro, and then I do them, and sometimes they ramble. I think we could all agree on that, but I don't know. I kind of feel naked when we do nothing off the top here. I don't really have a crazy story for you, though, today. We're in the thick of broadcast season. There's a lot going on. I called a game on Saturday. It was good. There are two things, though, that I am curious, as I thought and sat here and put pen to paper. And maybe we can make the beginning of this week's episode a little more interactive than usual. Hit us up on Twitter, at PXPcast. I'm at Joel Godet, JoelGodett. I think I've mentioned it on the pod before. Pretty open about it. I'm Jewish, member of the tribe. So, Shana Tova to all of my fellow tribers out there. It is the Jewish New Year this week. And one of the questions I've actually gotten from people in the past, being a broadcaster and being Jewish this time of year, is if I'm going to work on the holidays. Sandy Koufax very famously did not pitch on Yom Kippur. That's kind of the historical standard as far as that goes. That's the one time that people always reflect back on. And I've had several people ask me. I don't know if anybody from work has asked. And I don't know if anybody ever asks seriously. I think there's kind of like an in jest. Like, what, you're calling a game on Yom Kippur? I've never really thought to do anything else. It's football season. I get 12 opportunities to do this. And I know the Jewish New Year happens once a year, so mathematically I'm outnumbered there. But, you get 12 opportunities to do it. You work all year for it. You strive all year for it. To give one of those up is tough. And even, Yom Kippur is a fasting holiday. So, Ball State played North Texas a couple of years ago, and it was a day game. I didn't fast. I drank during the game. I think I ate right before the game. Certainly drank I'm broadcasting, I'm talking, I'm parched. And this coming Saturday, not tomorrow if you're listening to this on time, but next Saturday is Yom Kippur. And Ball State plays at Western Michigan. It is a night game. I'll probably try to fast during the day. But if it was a 12 o'clock start, I probably would eat. And I most certainly would drink during it. So I'm curious if there are other members of the tribe that listen to this podcast. Hit me up on Twitter. I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on it. If you've ever thought about it, if it's ever crossed your mind, if anybody's ever broached the subject with you as we get toward into the high holiday season, how you've thought about that and how you've kind of bantied it about in your head, broadcasting on the Jewish high holidays. I've always done it. I've always been for it, but I'm curious what you guys think. One of the other things I'm curious about interactively, and if we're all here to listen to other people and to learn, but we can certainly learn from more than just the guest we have on every week. We can learn from each other. Another big thing that happened over the past week, certainly in broadcasting, and this isn't in play-by-play, but I'm intrigued by it because I'm a political junkie. I watch all the cable news shows. I listen to all the podcasts. I read a lot. The Jemele Hill saga at ESPN with what she tweeted in regards to the president and then the recourse after that and everything that fell out afterward. I am curious, as broadcasters, and this is my greater point here, feel free again, shoot us a tweet, get the conversation started at PXPcast or at Joel Godet, what you guys tweet about and who follows you and what they follow you for, and if bosses tell you different things, but just kind of what your approach is to kind of who you are on Twitter. If you tweet solely about the team that you cover, if you have like a separate private account that does certain things, or if you are who you are and you've got diverse interests and you do it in a muted fashion. But I'm curious what the general kind of thought is, maybe across some play-by-play broadcasters here. Hit us up on both those topics if you're interested or curious or want to get the conversation started at PXPcast and or at Joel Godet. So that's I guess the intro for today. Sometimes I don't know what to do with it. I just want to dive right into the guests because I know that's why you guys are here. But let's see if we can't have a little fun, get some conversation started on social media this week in particular. All right, on to our guest, Mick Gillispie, who, as I mentioned off the top, voice of the Tennessee Smokies, Double-A for the Cubs since 2007, Ballpark Digest Minor League Broadcaster of the Year, with Howard Kellman of the Indianapolis Indians this year. In this conversation, we will start with that honor, but we're also going to kind of span the course of his career. We're going to talk about what he views as broadcast superpowers and exactly what that means and how it applies both to his career and all of our careers, really. We'll talk about his influences. You'll hear a lot about Mel Allen and Red Barber. He has his own production house. We'll talk about that. And if you stick around till the end, we will talk about Will Ferrell a little bit as well. So kind of a broad swath discussion here with Mick Gillispie. One quick note on a technical front. I don't know what happened. There were 2 segments of this interview that add up to a grand total of 3 minutes. I don't know if I knocked the recorder or twisted it a certain way, but I just recorded silence for about a minute and a half and about a minute and a half somewhere else as well. That's why you check the recorder, folks. But there's 2 breaks in there. Maybe you'll hear them, maybe not. They're edited down. If it seems a little off in 2 specific spots, that's what you caught. If not, I didn't have to say this, and a little bit too much pulling back of the curtain and inside baseball. But that being said, let's dive right into it with Mick Gillispie of the Tennessee Smokies and the 2017 Broadcaster of the Year in Minor League Baseball from Ballpark Digest.
Yeah, I think it's cool. When I first found out, I saw it was Howard Kellman that was the other guy, and I thought that was really cool. A couple reasons why. Like, I'm a Alabama graduate. I went to the same school as Mel Allen. And when Mel got into the Hall of Fame, he was inducted with Red Barber. And I've read all of Red Barber's books. And I think, like, I like to tell stories and I like to get into other stuff on the air. But I really like Red Barber. And I have a picture of those 2 in my booth, Mel and Red. And so there was just a part of me that, look, this isn't the Baseball Hall of Fame or anything.
Sure.
But I just kind of felt like, it's pretty cool to kind of be inducted with someone. And I've never met Howard, but I have a lot of respect for him. I remember people telling me, about him from, other broadcasters in the league and guys that have interned with him. He's done 6,000 games and he's been on the air since the 70s. So to me, he may not look at it like that, where he's like, God, I got this award with Mick Gillispie. But for Mick Gillispie, I look at it and I go, that's really cool to be mentioned in the same company as Howard Kellman.
You didn't make that number up, too, by the way. I think he's actually probably done 6,000 games.
I researched. I looked at it, and I heard about, kind of how fast he bounced back from some health issues, I guess last year.
Last year, yeah.
And I just thought, like, this guy's a phenomenal, man. He loves the craft. He's the voice of his city. And he's not, on a national level, probably not going to get the recognition that he deserves. But for us, guys that have been in this a long time, we realize how special that he is. And I think of Larry Ward, who was one of my partners in Chattanooga, and he's been with the Lookouts for 30 years. Those guys mean a lot to those teams and to the fans of those teams and to the leagues. Maybe they don't, they're not a major league broadcaster per se, but in their city they are. And, I just tip my cap. And I look, I know I've got a long way to go to, to kind of get to where Howard is or Larry. I haven't been in it that long, but I definitely respect what they've done. And it's just a huge honor to be the co-broadcaster of the year with someone that has done so much and is so distinguished. So honestly, I think it's cooler than even if it was just, me that got it. I love the fact that, we're both being honored together and, and that he's done so many great things in his career.
Let me go back to two of the names you mentioned right off the top. First of all, though, and I guess one of them in particular, and that's Red Barber. Why is there a picture hanging in your booth of him? What is it about him that you've admired, that you were drawn to when you got an interest in broadcasting, and I guess particular who he was?
So when I first started broadcasting, the very, very first time I ever met a professional broadcaster was as a college student. One of my friends who pitched at Alabama was by chance, and there was no relation for me getting the job eventually, but he was a pitcher for the Smokies. He pitched at Alabama, helped lead the Tide to the World Series, and he took me up in his full uniform to the press box and said, "Hey, this is my friend, and he wants to get into broadcasting." Well, the Smokies broadcaster was Tim Grubbs at the time, and he said, "Hey," and really didn't have a lot of time for me. But the visiting broadcaster was Mark Hauser, and he was the voice of the Greenville Braves. And I don't know why he did it. He gave me his phone number. He let me sit in his booth. He went out of his way for me. He rolled the red carpet out. And so, Mark kind of got me started in broadcasting. And the first thing he told me was that I needed to lose my accent. And the second thing he said was, "You need to read this book. It's called The Broadcasters by Red Barber." And so that's how I really started my pro career, like by reading this book. And in this book, it's like a history of play-by-play broadcasting, how it started. And then by the end of the book, Red's giving you all of the things that he did to become one of the greatest broadcasters of all time. And then Mel Allen, I think this is really cool. When I went to Alabama, I had no idea that the voice of This Week in Baseball and of the Yankees was an Alabama grad. I didn't know that he gave Bear Bryant his houndstooth hat. I didn't know that he used to do Alabama football. I didn't know any of that. I just went to school there. And we eventually I found out, as a broadcasting student, but while his sister and brother were still alive, we wanted to do a Mel Allen bobblehead doll for the, as a fundraiser.
Oh, cool.
And so we got to know his sister and his brother because they had to sign off on it to use his likeness. And part of that was that we got to go to the library at the university, and in the library is all Mel Allen's effects. So we got to go in there and see, all of the things that Mel Allen had in his apartment when he passed away, and, his awards, the pictures, and all that kind of stuff. So the picture that I have in my booth is a picture of Mel Allen and Red Barber, who were like oil and water as broadcasters. They were a lot different. And I don't even know if they got along that well when they were alive, maybe especially when they were broadcasting, Mel the Yankees, and then, Red the Dodgers, and then eventually it worked together with the Yankees. But it's a picture of them doing the World Series, and we got a scan of that picture. And every booth I've had as a professional, I've had that picture blown up and in there. And as a matter of fact, a couple years ago, the Smokies were redoing the booths, and they took my picture, and they basically took it down, and they were doing all of the art in the press box, updating it and doing it nicer, and they redid it, and it looks fantastic. So they're still in there. And I look up at them all the time and think, you know what? I mean, that's kind of what you're striving for. The first two ever baseball broadcaster Hall of Famers, like Red to me. Like he's going to do it like a reporter would do it. I mean, he's going to kind of be not the story. He's just going to report what he sees, and he's going to do it in a professional way where he's going to do it smoothly and kind of stay out of the way of the game. And then the Mel Allen style is more of a, hey, look, we and us maybe a little bit. Hey, I'm not going to mention it's a no-hitter, whereas, Red would. Maybe a little bit more personality. Maybe you interject, players' perspective a little bit more. But I think that's a good philosophy too. But really, at the end of the day, what it comes down to is who are you? What are you going to do on the air to be yourself? I used to play baseball. I've umpired the game. I've been around it a long, long time. So to me, my personality is more of a Mel Allen, even though I have, the utmost respect for Red Barber. And when I set up my career, I learned kind of the basics, the ABCs of broadcasting. It came from Red Barber's book. To me, it's like I've got to be myself, and so we've had a no-hitter. We had a perfect game going into the ninth. I don't think I ever said the word perfect game, but I did mention that there were goose eggs on the scoreboard, and I alluded to it so many times that you couldn't have listened and not known, but I never said it because, I just felt like, as a former player, I don't want to jinx anything, and I don't even believe in jinx, but that's kind of the philosophy that I adopted. And I think that everyone that is in this business, they need to find what works for them.
Where else does the baseball player in you come out in what you do? I found a quote from Len Casper in an article that basically said that he thought, and maybe still thinks, that you're one of the best kind of scouts of talent, of guys that come through the organization. How does that all play into, when you look at Chris Bryant in Double-A, how you can evaluate what you're seeing versus what I'm going to be able to see, which is I'm going to paint a picture and tell you stories that, we've talked about. I'm not going to be able to really analyze the way he plays the game in the same type of way. How does that make you unique, and how do you apply that?
Well, I appreciate Len for saying that. And it takes a long time to kind of prove yourself when it comes to the scouting report that you give people on players, because as a broadcaster, they're not looking at you going, okay, why does this guy know that Sam Folds, one of the greatest outfielders in the minor leagues, he's batting 220? Well, that's how I got to know Gary Hughes. He sat in my booth, and I said, this guy, he's amazing. I said, the pitchers love when he's in the outfield, and when he's not out there, they get mad because he takes so many extra base hits away from the other team, or how do I know when we had a kid named Kevin Hart that pitched for us, and this is all the way back in 2007. He had an ERA that was around 10, and he had given up 9 or 10 runs in the first inning, or maybe a first inning and a half of a game. And we're walking in the outfield. I'll never forget it. Walking into the outfield in Jackson, Tennessee, and I stopped and I said, "Hey," I said, "You're doing good." And he's like, "What do you mean? You saw my last start?" And I said, "Yeah, but look, it's close. I can just tell. I mean, because I've tried to hit these guys, and I'm looking at it, and I'm going, okay, so he's got this break. He's got his fastball moves. He's got this I guess curve slurve pitch that he throws that has a lot of really late break to it. I'm thinking as a player in my mind, I don't want to hit this. And then I'm looking back at his last 2 or 3 starts where it's like the shortstop's not very good. He's got no range. If he makes one play, the inning ends. Or there was an error that Kevin actually made in that game where he gave up the 10 runs. And I think like 8 of them came with 2 outs after it wasn't an error, but he misplayed a bunt. So, if the official scoring is different, or if he makes the play, it's a, he doesn't give up any runs. And I told him that, and he ended up making it to the major leagues that season, and from that point on. Now, our pitching coach, Dennis Llewellyn, worked a cutter in. So he was able to kind of he had the curveball that would come in from the right, and then he had that cutter that would bring kind of a pitch that would bring movement in from the left. but I don't know, man. I've played so many games of baseball as a kid that I can tell by watching why guys are good, because I used to sit on the bench and wonder why I wasn't good, and what makes them tick, and then kind of how they are able to differentiate themselves from everyone else. So, that's a couple examples from 2007. Now, as a broadcaster, it's been difficult to turn that ability into a major league job. And I joke with some of my buddies in broadcasting about, I call it broadcasting superpowers. When you work with guys who are very talented, what is it that makes them different than everyone else? One of my good friends is Wayne Randazzo. When he was in the Southern League, I knew he was good, but when I heard him do a sports update when he was working with the Score in Chicago, it was flawless. The pacing, the timing, his voice. And I realized at that point that that's his superpower. And then now he's gone, to the Mets, and he's excellent, I didn't think he was bad before. But that was the one thing that I looked at with him and said, this differentiates him from everyone else, because we all do sports updates, but they're not good like this. They're not perfect. And his were absolutely perfect. When Joe Davis was in the Southern League, he didn't know the game that well. I don't even know if he still does. I mean, maybe he does, but he doesn't need to. He's got an analyst there. But there's never been a guy that I've been around that pays closer attention to the details of broadcasting and then can tell you about them than Joe. That's his superpower, that he will look at or listen to a tape and he will pick every single thing out of it that needs to improve and tell you how to improve it. And then, for a young guy, and to me, I've never thought, like, in terms of age, I don't think it matters. I mean, I think if you're good, you're good, and if you're not, you're not. But you look at his age and you realize, like, this guy can give you a critique that you're going to get from him, and it's going to be better than anyone else. So I'm not surprised that his career's taken off, but that's a superpower. I mean, he's able to assess a broadcast, figure out what needs to improve, and then improve it. And he's also able to to improve on the things that, or at least he did back when he was in this league, things he needed to be better at. It happened pretty fast, and you could tell him something one time and he'd figure it out. So, but all these guys kind of have that one thing. Ben Ingram, he's one of my best friends. He's with Atlanta. He's on their pregame show. Ben's superpower is that he's got this great voice and this awesome delivery. He's so easy to listen to. And when you listen to the Braves pre or post, or when he fills in for Jim, he's fantastic. So for me, it's like, hey, how do you take this this ability to, like, break down players and to see things that not a lot of other people see? Now, scouts see it because I talk to them about it, but when it comes to other media people or broadcasters, I'll say that, did you notice that? Like, and then they'll be like, what are you talking about? I'm like, that first step, it's awful, and that line driving the gap, like, because I remember being a pitcher and throwing a pitch, and then and someone wasn't able to get to the gap and cover it because they just didn't have a first step, So for me, it's like I'm going back to the days when I played, and I'm looking back and I'm going, okay. Or when someone does something amazing, like a Jacob Hanneman who won a Gold Glove yesterday, I nicknamed him the Ball Hawk because he just was always where the ball was. And of all these outfielders, and we've had some great ones, and he's with Seattle now in the major leagues, he's one of the very best at just running down fly balls. Kind of not quite like Sam Fold, where it's like, this instinctual thing. He just is an amazing athlete, and he can and he identifies where the ball's going, like, really quick, and gets to it. So hopefully someone will want a major league broadcaster that could, break down players with relative ease sometime soon.
What do you think makes overall? I guess what's the most important superpower? What makes good baseball radio? Or or what do you look for when you're listening for good baseball radio?
Yeah, well, when I started out, and I've done this for over 10 years now. Actually, I think I'm closing on 15. I thought, well, you know what? If I tell a good story, and if I can explain the game on the radio, and it's an entertaining and fun listen, then that's what's going to get me there. And then what I realized is that there's also a delivery part of it that I underestimated. STAAtalent.com, they've got a fantastic site, and they represent a lot of guys that are coming up, but they'll put out like different things like tips and things to help young broadcasters get started out. It wasn't until maybe like 4 years ago that I saw this pyramid that they had, and one of the top things on the pyramid was voice. How to use your voice. And so I talked to other broadcasters about that, because I felt like for me that was the weakest link in what I did. Is like, okay, how do you make your voice better? How do you make it a little less high pitched or a little less nasally? And how do you talk through your diaphragm? And you learn all these things, and for every guy it's different. Ben Ingram, he just naturally got an amazing voice. The guy who really got me going in baseball was Chuck Thompson, a Hall of Famer with Baltimore. And he had just this golden voice. It wasn't anything he had to work on. It was there for him. So, but for some of us, you've got to keep on working on, hey, you can entertain the audience. People like listening. You know what you're talking about. You're giving the score and the inning. I've never had a complaint from any of our fans about my voice, but I realized, like, hey, he got a voice coach, and Shaq recommended her to me. And I'll tell you what, man, for one whole season, every single week, sometimes twice a week, she would. She worked in New York. She worked with Broadway performers, and she had a different regiment that we would go through, and then she would give me homework. And I got to tell you, man, it was like halfway through, I'm like, you know what? This is really paying off. And it had a lot to do with breathing and, and just the direction that when you're talking, where are you projecting your voice? Are you letting it go through your nose? Or are you putting it, down through your mouth? And I got a textbook and I read that, and I really noticed the difference. So I don't think there's a huge difference, but when I hear the highlights from 2 or 3 years ago or 4 years ago before I worked with her, and then the ones that I do now, there's a big difference. And then the other thing was just learning how to have a solid excited voice. And that, I talked with guys who are in the major leagues that were in my league, without telling on anyone, but, and we used to talk about that. Hey, are you going to be ready when that moment comes to just hit it the right way, to breathe the right way, not to, overdo it. I got to tell you, there's some guys that are so good, but their voice is so bad, or their excited voice is so bad that they're never going to make it. And it's like you're looking at them and you're going, dude, you're that close, man. And they're oblivious to that. For me, I look at it like, if there's one or two things that I can do to improve, why not try to figure out what they are and at least give it a try?
Tell me about your rise through the minor leagues too, to even get to the point where you're at now. Because I look at where you've been to, and you were in Salem, you were in Chattanooga. You've mentioned the Wilson Tobbs, I think was where you first started in the Coastal Plains League. But you and we talked about this before we even started rolling. But just from the standpoint of, you've done a lot of building radio networks, selling airtime.
Yeah.
If I've got, do you have your own production company now too?
Yeah, I do.
What are all the different things you've done that have made you better or opened some different doors for you that you think have helped you get to where you are?
Well, when I first started out, I was at the University of Alabama, and I went to winter meetings. And I thought it would be competitive, but my broadcasts in college, not because I was on the air, but because I was in charge. And I think that leadership's been something that has come natural for me, and it is, it's easy, because I don't know why, it just is. And when I was in college at the University of Alabama, I had this grudge against Syracuse because I got into Syracuse, but I couldn't afford to go to school there. So I wanted to kick their ass, honestly, in every single award that they had in broadcasting. I wanted us to, from this, we didn't have a broadcasting school per se. I mean, we got to get on the air on the college radio station. But for this poor kid from Baltimore that came to Alabama because it was when I was at Maryland, I couldn't afford to pay half as expensive as out of state back then, And I just had this grudge. I wanted to beat Syracuse because I thought, if you're going to charge $40,000 a year and keep me out, I want you guys to think about me every time there's an award, and I want us to win. We won a lot. We didn't always win the main award, but we got a lot of awards. And I had a great group of guys who have all gone on to some amazing stuff in this business around me. But I remember the first day I took over as the sports director. I mean, it was a shock. Hey, guess what? You're not just going to get on the air anymore. You're going to get on the air with a purpose. You're going to earn your airtime. You're going to earn the right to do a play-by-play game. I'm going to critique it. If it stinks, you're going to hear about it from me. And some guys didn't make it, and then some guys hated it but flourished, and they'll laugh about it to this day. So it's funny to think about now, but when it was all said and done, you look back and it was like we killed it. And Syracuse wasn't even one of the schools that we even dealt with. when it got to the bottom line, it was like Marshall and Ithaca and some of these other places back then, but Syracuse, they weren't even in our atmosphere back then. I'll put it like that. But and look, I've got nothing but respect for the Orange. But people that had come from the background that I do, we can't afford to go to school there. So it was like, hey, I'm gonna make this a point to go in there and them to have to talk about Alabama. So when I went to the first winter meetings, I'm thinking, you know what? Hey, we just won 22 national awards over whatever, how many years.
Yeah.
And we never won any before I got there. And then I realized that there were 5 jobs for 400 people. and then I wasn't going to get one, but I met a guy who wasn't going to hire me, but said, hey, look, you know what? I might know a guy who knows a guy. And so that opened the door to Wilson, North Carolina. And I had to tell this guy, look, hire me. I'm going to come in there. I'll sell the broadcast. It'll be the best broadcast that you've ever had. We're going to make some money. And that's what we did. We went in there. We were on a 25,000 watt station, which was amazing because in North Carolina, I mean, you're talking about, a huge amount of territory that it covers because there's no mountains to cut down the signal. You could hear that thing all over the place. It was a station called Katy Country. We sold it. The GM was happy. He made money. I was happy. I was on the air. And that started the career, my broadcasting career. And then that same GM went to Salem, Virginia as an assistant GM. He gets the job and he's like, hey, we got to have Mick. Went there. And then, and ironically, I was in Tennessee before him, but the two of us team up now. He's the president of the team, So that's been kind of one of those things that you can never predict, and he's one of the best executives in baseball, and it's because he's so good at, the business end of things and making money, but he's also good at finding people that were like I was back then, where I would have stayed up there and to get a chance to get on the air, I would have stayed up there all night long and all day long to sell if I had to, So from there, I went to Chattanooga. The owner of the team in Salem when I was there. He was an old baseball scout named Kelvin Bowles, and he hated me. I don't know why. He was a lot like Charlie Finley, because when I read John Miller's book, the things that he wrote about Charlie Finley remind me of this guy. His son was a fantastic guy. This guy was awful. He was I've never been around someone, maybe not off the work thing, but all at the work site. This is a story. I've never told this story before. I had made a lot of money for this team. So I was the third bestseller that they had in Salem back then. And so I'm not talking about broadcasting. I'm just talking about their whole sales team. They had two guys ahead of me. And you're talking about, for them, that's a lot of house accounts and stuff. So there was no way I could have been higher than where I was. And so we're given Christmas bonuses, and this guy comes in, looks around the room, and says, "I really don't feel like you guys deserve these bonuses, but the GM said you got to get, you're getting them, so here they are." My wife's sitting right there next to me. I've been on the road with the team. I've been working from 7 a.m. until 8 o'clock at night. The entire time I'm there, I'm listening to this guy tell me how to do play-by-play, and then that's what he tells me at the Christmas party. The next job offer I got was in Chattanooga, and I tipped my cap, turned their 2-year contract down, and went on to Chattanooga, and that was it, And that's a true story. And then I worked with Larry Ward in Chattanooga. I did 2 years there, and I'd say one of the biggest turning points in my career was Larry did a TV game. I'm going to guess maybe it was CSS back then that put the game on. He was the color guy on the TV game, because when they would do the minor league games, they'd take the home guy and throw him on. And I did a game with Tom Hart, who's with the SEC network, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe how good Tom was and how bad Mick sucked. And I remember driving home after that game, and I said to myself, if I am not going to be that good, I'm not going to make it. And Tom was funny. He was on point. It was just so easy for him. Like, the game just was slow. And for me, it was so fast, and I'm doing my best I think I'm this great play-by-play guy. And then I get in front of, on the same radio as Tom. I realize, hey, this guy right here. And his career's, look, he's an excellent broadcaster, no doubt about it. And he still is. He's one of the best. And, for me, I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to compete with this guy? It was the first time I ever had to look in the mirror. And what I said was, if you aren't able to improve enough, then you need to get out of this, because that's what it's supposed to sound like. And to Tom's credit back then, he took the time to teach me a lot of stuff. And, it helped me with kind of setting up the basics of broadcasting, which is so important now. If he hadn't done that, I really don't know where my career would be, but he did. And that kind of was that moment where I think I realized how difficult the competition was and how I needed to improve. And so from there, I ended up getting the Smokies job, which was his gig. He left, and there were hundreds of people that applied, and they hired me, and I'm so thankful that they did, because that led into Alabama women's basketball, and I did that for 7 years. And my thing's been this: I did the Alabama women's basketball until it wasn't fun for me anymore. When you these jobs don't pay enough to do them and not enjoy doing them, and the minute that I got out of doing that, and then started working with the SEC network and started doing things with Tide in Tuscaloosa, the football flagship station, pre and post, it's hey, my biggest thing's been, if you're not getting paid enough to put up with a lot of stuff. So if you show up and it's not fun, particularly with these lower level play-by-play jobs, then find something else, And I had some really good years at Alabama. Wendell Hudson, who was basically Alabama's Jackie Robinson. was our head coach. He was the first black scholarship athlete. He's still one of my best friends. And I'm going to tell you, man, like every single game when he was head coach, it was fun. He was great to the players. He was great to me. He was great to everyone because that's the only way he knows. And then, you know, when they fired him, it was like, you know, it just wasn't the same, you know. And so for me, it was like, hey, good luck to you guys, but it's time for me to kind of take that next thing and do something else. And I feel like with this career, you know, that's the way you look at it. Like, I guess it gets to the point where you're making too much money to not take it and not have a good time. But every time I've showed up for work, it's been a job that I've wanted to do, and I've had fun with it.
So how do you get to the point where you start your own production company, and how nuts an idea is that?
Yeah, well, so yeah, that's an entirely different a different story. But one of the things that I've been able to do is work with people and kind of take.
Well, I guess first off, what do you guys produce? Like what? We're talking games and things like that, or
yeah,
is that
yeah. I mean, like my production company, like I don't technically work for the Smokies. They have an agreement with my production company. So we basically are in charge of putting a broadcast on and doing media relations, and that's it. You know, like I could show up to work at 5 o'clock every day. As long as that work got done, no one's they don't have really a right to say anything about it. You know, like their thing is like, hey, we just need this work done, and then you guys handle it. Or, you know, our shows in Alabama, it's the same thing. It's just it's easier for me to use my equipment, my personnel, and my techniques, and kind of just put the show on for those guys. You know, you just give me the money and I'll take care of that. I'll take care of everything else, you know. And we've kind of dove into some TV production as well. And it's the same thing, you know. I think part of it was that they're all worried about how much time you're spending doing something now, you know. So our jobs, we're not able to like put down a part-time hour. You know, it's like, hey, you know, it may take us 3 hours, but it might take us 7. But we kind of love doing it so much that we instead of like kind of putting us in a box with a certain hour that we're allowed to work, you know, we'd rather kind of just, and for me anyway, I'd rather just give me the job. I'll get it figured out as a private contractor, and then here's the final result, you know. And if you go back and look at our television show this year, Bear Tracks, which it's on my website, mickthebroadcaster.com, under show host. You got to check it out. We shot that thing and produced it on our Macs with 2-point-and-shoot cannons. And I'll tell you what, if someone can do a better show than that, I want to see it. I just want to see it. I mean, maybe they can, but I'm going to tell you, for a bunch of, you know, play-by-play broadcasters, I'm pretty proud of it. I think it's funny. It's got a little bit of stupid baseball humor, but you know, you look at it at the end of the day, and you're like, you know what? You put that on TV, people like it, you know, and the ratings, so the show bore that out as well. So the production company thing was kind of, I guess, out of necessity, because as we moved on from, you know, hey, here's, you know, 40 hours a week to do this. It got to the point where there's so many different things that I want to do that I don't want to be put in a box like that. That's how it started. And then, you know, business is kind of like that, you know, in this business, they like to just have the final product. So I guess that's the best way to describe it.
Obviously, everybody wants to get to the major league level at the end of the day, and I know you've had a chance to get there in spurts. I know you do the spring training games. You did a Dodgers game or Dodgers series this year with the Cubs. That's true too?
I did the Dodgers and Cubs during spring training. Okay. And got to work with Ryan Coomer on the score. Okay. This year, and unfortunately, yet I haven't been there for the regular season, but. You know, the Cactus League.
What's it like to get that call in the Cactus League and be able to work with Ron, and then on the TV side to do the work you've done there too?
Yeah. Well, it's great. Ronnie's awesome. You know, when I won the broadcaster of the year, Ronnie was like the first guy to call me. You know, and it's like you just kind of like, hey man, you're part of this. You know, you're one of the guys that I got to team up with, and I don't think it's any different than any other game. Honestly, it's a different. You know, you're just on in Chicago, or you're just on MLB.com, and if you look at it like it's any other game, if you're not preparing every single day to be on that show there at the major league level, it's really tough to say, well, you know what, today I'm going to work half-assed, and then tomorrow I'm going to work full-assed. Like, it doesn't work like that. My biggest thing for me personally has been, and this year I was really a stickler about this. I didn't want to do too much after work because I wanted to come in the next day and put on a show, a great show. I just felt, and I honestly just felt like, I think you get to the point where people are going to tune you in and they're going to say, hey, there's Mick Gillispie on the air. And if you went out and got tanked the night before, people are going to be able to tell. And you don't want them to, but they're going to be able to tell, you know. So I said to myself, like, look, I don't want anyone to listen and think anything other than this guy right here is one of the best guys to listen to in this league. And that was kind of my motivation was just, you know, hey, if anyone turns the game on in the Southern League, I want them to say, hey, you know what, one of the guys you really got to hear is this Mick Gillispie guy. That's what kind of turned me on every day to, you know, go out and do my best. And then our fans who listen and really appreciate our broadcast and are vocal about it. That's the other thing. You know, you don't want to let anyone down. So, you know, I just tried to stay really focused on a routine. You know, I'm going to show up I show up about 3:00 every day. I got my coffee. I'm going to go through and read all my stories. I've got this OneNote that Joe Block got me started on, and now I'm at it. And it's like, I got to have, you know, I got my this date baseball history, and I got my daily reads, and then I got notes on all the players, and I update that all the time. And so I just, you know, I want to go in there and be really organized and have all that stuff ready and try to do the same things every day at the same time. I know that's weird, but that's kind of how I've done it.
The other thing I thought was interesting, and this I guess is a major league sense of things for you too, and I guess kind of goes along the same lines. You've got a fairly large kind of Chicago media presence to you also, and I mean, you're on with them a lot, and they pick your brain a lot about prospects and things of that nature. And there are a lot of us that, you know, when you're coming up in the industry, people always think about how to grow your footprint and how to do more things and do more things for different people and kind of get yourself exposure and building brands and all those kind of buzzwords. But it's not the easiest thing in the world always when you think about it that way. How did you go about it, and how did you find success to get to the point where you could get people in Chicago to say, you know, we need to have the Tennessee Smokies radio guy on because he's a benefit to us? Yeah,
well, it goes back to what I told you my superpower is. I said I can tell you who can play, and I can tell you who can't play. And when, you know,
and have something to sell them, basically.
Hey, when people were pushing some of the Cubs prospects in the past that weren't good enough, I said that. You know, and I there were times where I was the only guy. There was a player named Junior Lake. There was no chance that Junior Lake was ever going to be a great player. He couldn't lay off of the slider middle away. It was like kryptonite. Or what was his name? Alcantara. He's still in the big leagues now, and he's a great kid. But when he's a switch hitter, when he bats left-handed, you can get him out on a changeup every single time. I mean, like it's. And as a guy that pitched growing up, I just know. I can look at it and tell you. I could get this guy out. Or take a Kyle Hendricks. No,
he was phenomenal.
Right. But when he was with the Smokies, he was a nobody. And he and I used to sit around and talk about, like, how we'd get people out sometimes. We'd run in and say, hey, this guy, you know, Dan Black, what do you think? And he's like, yeah, change up inside. I'm like, yeah, dude, I see it. It's there every time. And that's when I realized that this guy, which he was good, but I'm like, this guy's going to be great.
Yeah.
You know, he's going. It did not surprise me that he went to the major leagues and then was the National League's earned run champion last year. But I said it at Cubs convention on stage in front of everyone else. His dad came up to me and thanked me. This is before he ever pitched a big league game. Said, hey, watch this guy. Or there's another kid, Chesney Young. He's going to be a good player. I don't know if he's going to be a major league star or anything like that, but he's going to be a good player. He's going to get to the big leagues eventually, and he's going to be a guy that's going to bat. You can just tell. And so when I first started out, you know, I was kind of the guy that would dispel a lot of the myths. No, you know, this guy, and I don't want to insult anyone, so I don't really want to get into too many of them. But,
Sure,
you know,
sure.
Who was the other guy? There was another guy.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on the Hendricks thing, by the way, because I had him in Myrtle Beach, and you could see it then.
Yeah, but it's like, but he's not on the prospect guy.
Nope.
You know?
No, because he's from Dartmouth.
What?
Yeah.
No, because he throws 89. But it's like, hey, guess what? 89 and 86, when you can put the ball exactly where you want it, 25 out of 25 times with cut, you can get guys out. You know, like I remember like watching him throw a bullpen, and he hit all 25 pitches right where he wanted them. I don't think you could go to the major leagues, and I'm guessing that a handful of guys could do that. That's really, really, really extremely amazing. But he can do that, and that's why, you know, other guys may struggle, but he's not going to. But look, man, there's sometimes too where you miss guys. We had Casey McGee on our team in 2007. I never thought Casey McGee would have an extended major league career, but I'm glad he did. I always liked him. It just didn't pop out to me. But what got me, what I think got the media comfortable with me was, you know, we would talk about players they'd ask me about, and I'd tell them what I thought. And I think I was right a lot more than I was wrong. And instead of like reading, you know, a publication's, you know, breakdown of guys, here's someone that saw him play all the time, and was it. And then if you go on my site and you watch the interview that I did on CSN years ago, and I posted, it's on there. I'm talking about Chris Bryant being like Cal Ripken.
I watched
He's
that
still
one.
like Cal Ripken.
Yeah,
you watched it. You know what I'm talking about. He's still like Cal Ripken. But I saw that when he was when he was a Double-A player, you know, before he kind of got to, you know, to the status that he is right now. But I'm looking at this guy. He's a big guy. He doesn't go out and party. He's really focused on the game. He loves playing. Maybe he's a little bit oversized for his position, you know, whatever. But he's a special talent. I still think Javi Baez is scratching the surface on what he has. I mean, I really think he could be one of the greatest power hitters of all time. But he's as clutch as any player that's ever been there. And I said that on the show as well. But I saw it here. So, you know, I don't know. I'm not a scout, and those guys are really good at what they do. But I do have an ability to kind of look at. I got a pretty good idea of what I'm seeing, and then with that said, like as an amateur type of guy, I'm by no chance am I Gary Hughes or, you know, Jason McLeod or any of these guys. But when Dylan Maple shows up to your team and he's throwing 99 with a curveball that looks like the one your dad threw with a wiffle ball in the backyard, I don't care that he started out in A-ball and he's got a 6 ERA in his career. This guy's good, and he's going to get to the big leagues. You know, we did a TV interview with Dylan, and he walks in. I mean, he pitched like 2 games with the Smokies at the time, and I said, "Hey, so you're gonna make it, man. Like you're gonna get there." And he's like, freaked him out. You know, it's like, no, don't. You know, like I'm really focused on one game at a time. You know, this and that. I said, I've seen them all, man. I've seen them. You what you got? I mean, look, he's still got to work on fastball command. He's got to get better at at throwing strikes with that 99, but. I don't know if anyone else ever told him that before, and I wasn't trying to freak him out. But dude, you could just tell. You know, it's just when you throw 99 and then come back with the curveball that my father threw with the ball that was like taped with a little bit of that electrical tape, and it looked like it was going to hit you, and then it just came back over like a like a big hook. I mean, come on, you're doing that with a baseball. So it's not always being a genius, but I think it's just paying attention to the signs that are out there.
I have one last question for you, and then I'll let you go, and it's kind of a non sequitur, but I guess it's kind of on that note. I guess your evaluation of, or your experience being a broadcaster for one of the, I guess, 9 games that Will Ferrell played in the major leagues.
Yeah, I remember when we heard that Will was going to do that, and I was asking everyone, caucusing the different people around the Cubs that day, like, what do you think about this? And it was mixed reviews, like, I don't think anyone really knew what to think, what the right opinion. I was like, this is going to be great. and so we're at Tempe Diablo, Len and I, doing the game. And here comes this helicopter, and the way that we break our innings down is Len does the first 2. I do the second 2. Len does 2 more. I do the 7th, and he finishes the game, So here comes the helicopter in the second, and I'm like starting to do the math. I'm like, hey, wait a second here. I think this is going to work out good for me, And so Len's on the air, second inning. Here comes Will. He's got his entourage. And I mean, next thing I know, like I'm broadcasting the game, and now I'm on play-by-play, and Len's on color, which is still fun. No matter who's on play-by-play or color, it's just so easy to do and so fun. And this thing I know where he is. He's replacing Mike Trout, and he's coaching third, and he's got the signs, and he's batting and everything else. It was awesome. It was awesome. I put it on my site because I like it so much, but I don't know if anyone else even pays attention to it. Like, do you see that's Will Ferrell? That's the guy from Old School. He's right on there. So yeah, that was, I'd say of in my career where it is right now. I mean, that's probably one of the top 5 things that I've ever got to be a part of.
That's fair. It doesn't happen every day. So yeah, 100%. Mick, if people want to find your work at mickthebroadcaster.com, what is it? Mick the Broadcaster on Twitter too?
Yeah, Mick the Broadcaster on Twitter, Mick the Broadcaster on the internet, and that's just to make it easy because Gillispie can be a difficult name. There's like 10 different spellings of it. We did a game, Len and I, where there were 3 different spellings of Gillispie in that same game, pronounced the exact same way. When you factor in Connor Gillispie and then me and then who the other guy was, and we all spelled it totally different.
Yeah,
so,
Gillispie, and Gillispie.
Yes, but it's all Gillispie. Yeah. It's all said Gillispie, and that goes back to coming over from Ireland and then changing the name. And I guess that's just the way. My best friend gave me for my birthday a couple years ago, like my lineage. Like all the way back as far as he could find it. And on Ancestry.com, and it was really cool to see like that my name changed like 3 times in about 50 years. It's like, wait a second, like there's a census and your name's spelled this way, and the next census. I think part of it too is that I don't think people really could read and write as well back then. So I think that's an issue that they dealt with. But yeah, so that's what we did. We did the mickthebroadcaster.com.
That's got to have been fun. And Mick is a fun guy, by the way. When it comes to the Will Ferrell stuff, Mick's known for kind of his sense of humor too. If you do enough reading about him, and then obviously if you listen to him and you pull him up online, you'll hear that he has fun with the game. He does a really good job. Obviously, he was the co-broadcaster of the year in minor league baseball. And one of the things that I think, if you go to that website that we just talked about, Broadcaster Mick, or Mick the Broadcaster, he has a video of the Rickwood Classic, which the Tennessee Smokies play in, and they go to a very old ballpark, Rickwood. It's the oldest ballpark in the country, I believe. Don't quote me on that. But in the video, Mick is dressed up in old-fashioned baseball style, like doing his actual job, like calling the game, interacting with the players. It's like showing up to work in costume one day. He really got into it. And I mean, like the old-fashioned, like barbershop quartet-looking hat, and like the old-fashioned blue and white kind of checkered jacket. He had it all. So he has fun with his job. He enjoys his job. His passion, his enthusiasm for what he does clearly shines through. And a guy that is a really good kind of bastion for people to look at and look to in this industry. And I'm thrilled that he had time and was willing to be a part of this podcast. Again, remember, as we said off the top, let's see if we can't make it a little interactive this week. If you have your thoughts on how you run your Twitters, as far as kind of what topics you talk about, what topics you don't talk about, if you are just a broadcaster, if you're a sports fan, if you're a music fan, if you're a movie fan, if you're a politics fan, what interests you tweet about, how you tweet about, and how you handle yourself in that regard. You can start that conversation at Joel Godet or at PXPcast, and then I'll throw it out there as well, members of the tribe, if we want to have that. Have you ever thought about not broadcasting on the holidays conversation? I'm just curious what people's thoughts are on that topic. Get that conversation started again at PXPcast and at Joel Godet. In the meantime, we're going to take a 7-day hiatus. While we're gone, feel free to go through the back catalog, though. All of our previous episodes are there, almost 70 of them now. So if you want to dive deep into Wonkland with how to become a broadcaster, you've got plenty of options to go digging through. In the meantime, until next Friday, so long. This has been Play-by-Playcast, and we're out.